So in software development life cycle, there are mainly two categories of testing. First one is called white box testing, and the second one is called black box testing. So on interview, they might ask you, are you familiar with what white box testing is? And also, are you familiar with what black box testing is? So first, let's look at what white box testing is. White box testing is a type of testing mainly completed or done by the developer. So and under or within the white box testing, what the developer commonly do or test, it's called unit testing. And unit testing, to put it in a plain term, is when the developer tests each line of their code. So let's assume these are line of codes, and each developer will meet with their lead or with their senior developer, and they do what's called code review. What code review is that once the developer finishes the unit test, they do a code review. That means the senior will go over each line of the code and provide a feedback to the developer. And they will make the changes according to the feedback. So those kind of testings are called unit testing, and they are done by the developer. So as a tester, we are not responsible for those type of testing. The second type of testing, including or within the white box testing, that is called integration testing. So as you can tell from the word integration, integration means more than one or two components or modules working together. So if one developer has coded, let's say, the user email section of the application, the other wrote the code for the password section. But in order for someone to log into the application, it needs those two fields. They must merge those two codes together, and they test them to make sure they pass. Or they test each line of the code to make sure it is according to the standards and whatnot. So those making sure. And the benefit of doing this is it would put less stress on the tester, because if there's a lot of defects, if the developer can prevent that prior to reaching to us, that would be very helpful, and it saves a lot of time. The second one, and what we as a tester, what we technically do, it's called black box testing. So as you can tell, what black box testing might be is the QA test the application. if it meets the expected result. And under block box testing, there are a number of testing. So the first one, it's called smoke testing. This is the first and the simplest form of testing, and it's mainly done by when you start testing. For instance, let's say we have the user story 1, which says user needs to input email and password before logging in, right? So as a tester, what you do is you don't start directly creating a test case or writing a test script. What you do is you actually go to the application, let's say www.facebook.com, right? You go there and you test it, you put the password and you email, you click the login button, and you see if it's actually working or not. If it's not working, you can directly create a bug report for that. But if it's working, you create a test case and you find a way to break the application. So it is important to do smoke test when you get assigned a user story to test. So smoke testing is the first and the simplest form of testing. And this testing does not require a documentation. So the second type of testing is called functional testing. So in the interview, they'll ask you, okay, what kind of testing have you done? You can tell them, well, in my past project, I always do smoke tests prior to creating a test case or test script because it saves time. And also I do functional testing most of the time. Functional testing is pretty much testing to make sure the functionalities of the applications are working accordingly. According to what? According to the requirements. So this is kind of testing is called functional testing. For instance, for the username and password, that is a functional testing. If you write a test case for it. The other type of testing is called regression testing. So there's a lot of confusion between what regression testing is and what retesting is. Assuming you have an application, let's say this is application A, and you found a bug. Let's say these are the steps you created, these are the steps you followed. Let's say this is step 1, step 2, step 3, and step 4. So you created this test case, right? And there's a bug at step 3. So step 3, there's a bug or a defect. So what you do, you create a defect report, and once they say it's fixed, what you do is you retest the application. So here you do retest the application, the test case. By what I mean retest is go over the steps again and make sure step 3 has passed. But imagine we added another module or another component to the application A here, and we added another module here. So how do we know what we added, which is the circle and this pentagon side. We added these two components. How do we know these two, what added, does not affect this one, does not affect A? We do what's called regression testing. Regression testing means we test the entire module. We test if A is not affected by the circle, if the triangle or this shape is not affected by the circle. So that's called regression testing. So there's a difference, keep in mind. Regression is testing the added functionalities does not affect the prior one. That's why we have function automation testing, because this automation testing will automate itself and make sure what is added is not affecting the prior one instead of doing it manually. That is the third type of testing. There's a lot of them, but these are the common ones. Next, we have what is called performance testing. So performance testing is making sure the application performs according to the specification. And under performance, there are different types of testing. One is called load testing, and other called stress testing. So when we talk about load testing, is imagine if 100 people log into the application at the same time. Well, that adds a lot of pressure to the application. So, and testing how the application behaves under those circumstances, it's called load testing. And when we talk about stress testing, it's assuming 100 people log in and each one are performing different or various actions, such as one is paying loan, one is transferring money, one is paying credit card, one is requesting credit card, different activities. So the application gets stressed because there's a lot of activities it needs to handle, it needs to respond to. So testing how the application behaves under such circumstances is called stress testing. So normally they have different tools such as a load meter and other JMeter to test how the application behaves. So those are called stress testing. Another one, it could be a type of testing, it's security testing. So this is making sure the application is not vulnerable or can get easily attacked by any hackers. So making sure the system security is stable, it's called security testing. So those are just the common type of testing you should be familiar with. So when they ask you on interview, what are the categories of testing, you can tell them, well, there's a white box testing and there's a black box testing. As a tester, as a QA, I do what's called black box testing. And among the black box testing, I performed smoke testing, which is just the simplest and the easiest type of testing. Mainly I do functional testing, and I also do regression testing and whatnot. So those are just the type of regression testings.